You never really know how quiet a river can be until you hear something moving beneath it. That afternoon, I was just checking the old wooden bridge, the one I built with my own hands 30 years ago. The water was calm, silver in the sun, and for a moment it almost felt peaceful. Then I saw her, my daughter-in-law, driving up fast, her face pale, eyes wild like someone running from their own shadow. She stepped out, dragging a leather bag behind her. Heavy, too heavy, and before I could even call out, she threw it into the river. There was a splash, then silence. But a few seconds later, something moved. Something inside that bag. My heart froze. I didn't think, I just ran. Because when a man's lost everything once, he doesn't wait to lose it again. Before I tell you what I found beneath that water, take a second to subscribe, like, and share this story if you believe love can rebuild what loss destroys. Your support helps us keep telling stories of quiet strength, family, and redemption, stories just like this one. Now, let me take you back to that riverbank, where everything changed. It was one of those afternoons when the world felt completely still. No wind, no sound, just the creak of the dock and the soft hum of the river rolling past. I was out there checking the planks like I always did. That old bridge had been standing since the day Mark and I built it the summer before he left for college. Every nail, every scratch on that wood, it still held our laughter. But that day something broke the quiet. A car. Not just any car, her car, Lena's. I hadn't seen her for months, not since the funeral. She parked near the far bank, engine still running. She looked restless. The kind of restless you can feel even from a distance. I wiped my hands on my jeans, squinted through the sunlight, and that's when I saw it, a large leather bag. She dragged it from the trunk like it weighed the world. At first I thought it was garbage, or maybe some old tools, but then she threw it right into the water. The sound, thud, splash, silence. The bag hit the surface, then rolled once, twice, and began to sink. And then I heard it, something from inside. A faint knock. A shuffle, like something or someone was still alive in there. My heart froze. "Lena," I shouted, my voice cracking through the still air. "What are you doing?" But she didn't look back, not once. She just got in her car, slammed the door, and drove away. I stood there, watching the ripples spread across the water until they disappeared, just like she did. That silence after, it was worse than the sound. Because when you've already buried one person you love, your mind starts whispering things you don't want to believe. I walked closer to the edge, staring at that spot where the bubbles still broke through. The river looked darker than usual, like it was trying to keep a secret. I wanted to move, to jump in, to do something. But I just stood there, my legs heavy, my chest tight. For a long moment I couldn't even breathe. I don't know how long I stayed like that, seconds, minutes, maybe an eternity. The smell of the wet wood, the echo of my own heartbeat, the faint hum of that empty road, they all blended into one sharp memory. And suddenly I was back to that night a year ago. The phone call, the voice on the other end saying, "There's been an accident. Mark's car crushed beyond recognition. Lena pulled out alive with only a few scratches." And me standing by that same river, wondering how something so alive could vanish so completely. The same kind of silence, the same kind of still water. Back then I thought grief would teach me peace. But grief's a liar. It doesn't teach you peace, it just teaches you how to stand still while the world keeps moving without you. I knelt down, touched the water. It was cold, colder than it should have been for spring. A current brushed past my fingers as if the river was whispering, "Go on, look deeper." I wanted to believe it was nothing. Maybe an old suitcase full of junk. Maybe Lena was getting rid of something that reminded her of him. But that sound, that muffled sound, I couldn't get it out of my head. I backed away, hands shaking. My breath came short, like I'd run a mile without moving an inch. Something wasn't right. And deep down I knew this river had taken too much from me already. I tried calling her, straight to voicemail. I tried again, nothing. I even left a message. "Lena, I saw what you did, call me back, please." My voice sounded foreign, old, like it belonged to someone else entirely. The sun was starting to set now, painting the water gold and red. That kind of beauty that hurts to look at because it makes you remember. I sat down on the dock, right where Mark used to dangle his feet. I could still see him 10 years old holding a hammer way too big for his hands, saying, "One day, Dad, this bridge will outlast both of us." Maybe it will, son. Maybe it already has. I stared at the horizon, hoping the current would bring something back, an answer, a clue, a reason why Lena looked like a ghost behind that wheel, but the river kept its secrets. The thing about still water is it's never really still. Underneath, it moves fast, quiet, dangerous. You just don't see it until you're in too deep. I felt the same pull in my chest, like the current was under my skin. That bag, whatever was inside it, I couldn't just walk away. Maybe it was instinct. Maybe it was love, or maybe it was the part of me that still couldn't let go of Mark. Whatever it was, it told me one thing: don't look away this time. I went back to the house, grabbed my old boat hook and a flashlight. My knees protested every step, but my heart didn't listen. I told myself, you're not 68, you're just a father who's not done yet. When I came back, the river was calm again. No ripples, no sound, just that awful quiet that feels like the world's holding its breath. I shone the light over the water. Nothing. The beam caught on a few reeds, then a shimmer, something small and white floating near the surface. A baby's blanket. My throat tightened. My hands went cold. That couldn't be right. No, she wouldn't. But the mind can't unsee what the heart already suspects. I dropped to my knees, reached out with the hook, and pulled the edge of the blanket toward me. It was soft, embroidered with tiny stars. Something inside me cracked open, that feeling when pain turns into clarity. Lena hadn't just been throwing something away. She was hiding something. The bag was gone now, sunk deep. But the river doesn't keep secrets forever. It gives them back when you're ready to face them. I sat there for a while, the blanket in my lap, listening to the night rise around me. Frogs started croaking, wind moving through the trees, the water whispering its low tune. And in that moment, I realized I wasn't just staring at a river. I was staring at the line between what I knew and what I feared. You can live your whole life thinking you've buried the worst of it. But sometimes, the past has a way of floating back, right to your feet. The first stars began to appear. I stood up, legs stiff, and looked one last time at the spot where the bag had vanished. Tomorrow, I told myself, tomorrow I'll come back. I'll find out what she left behind. I turned toward the cabin, the wooden steps groaning beneath my boots. Inside, the air smelled of pine and dust, the kind of smell that never leaves an old man's house. Mark's photo still hung over the mantel, his smile frozen, his eyes alive. I lit the lamp beside it. "Son," I whispered, "if you're watching, I might need your help one more time." The flame flickered as if answering. I poured myself a cup of black coffee and sat by the window, eyes on the river. For the first time in months, I didn't feel numb. I felt something else, a pulse, a reason. You think grief teaches you peace. But sometimes it just teaches you to listen closer until it whispers that something's still wrong. And when that whisper becomes too loud to ignore, you have to follow it, no matter how deep the water runs. So that's what I did. If you've ever felt that tug, that voice that says, "Don't look away," then you know. Some things don't let go until you face them. And sometimes facing them is how you start to live again. Stay with me, because what happened next changed everything. The river looked different that morning, colder, heavier, like it knew something I didn't. I barely slept the night before. That image of the sinking bag, it played in my mind on repeat. Every time I closed my eyes, I could still hear that faint thump, like something inside was begging not to be forgotten. By sunrise, I couldn't take it anymore. I grabbed my old fishing boat from the shed, the same one Mark and I used to take out on lazy Sundays. The wood was cracked, the oars creaked, but it still floated barely. Maybe that was enough. The air was sharp, biting through my jacket. My hands trembled, not from the cold, but from what I was about to find. I pushed the boat into the water and climbed in, my knees stiff, my chest tight. Every stroke of the oar felt slower than it should have been, like the river was pushing back, trying to keep me away from the truth. Halfway out, I saw it, a faint ripple, a darker patch of water, something resting just below the surface. I held my breath. "All right," I muttered to myself, "let's see what you're hiding." I reached down with the hook, snagged the corner of the leather bag. The weight nearly pulled me overboard. It was heavy, too heavy. Mud clung to the sides, tangled with river grass and branches as if the earth itself was trying to hold it down. When I finally dragged it to the side of the boat, the sound it made, that hollow thud, it didn't sound like luggage. It sounded alive. My pulse pounded in my ears. I hesitated, staring at the old zipper now caked with dirt and algae. Every instinct screamed not to open it, but something deeper, something fatherly told me I had to. The zipper stuck halfway, rusted tight. I yanked it again and water spilled out, dark and murky, soaking my boots. Then I saw it, a small pink blanket, soft, soaked, and then a sound. At first I thought it was the wind. Then I realized it was crying, a weak, broken cry, barely there but real. My breath caught. Dear God! I tore the zipper the rest of the way open, and there it was, a baby, tiny, pale, trembling, still alive. The world went silent around me. No sound but the rain tapping the river and that fragile little cry trying to stay alive against all odds. I lifted the baby out, water dripping from the blanket, and held it against my chest. It was freezing, skin bluish, lips quivering. I wrapped it in my flannel, pressing it close. My hands shook so badly I could barely hold the phone. 911, I said, my voice cracking. This is Harold Pierce. I found a baby. It's alive. It's freezing. Please hurry. The dispatcher's voice was calm, steady, but I couldn't focus on her words. All I heard was that cry, short, faint, but fighting. I looked down at the baby's face. Small nose, closed eyes, a tuft of light brown hair. Something about it, something familiar. Hey, it's okay, I whispered, my voice trembling. You're safe now. You're safe. The baby's fingers moved, gripping the edge of my jacket. That one little movement hit harder than any blow I'd ever taken. I started rowing back fast as I could, the boat rocking dangerously. My knees screamed with every push, but I didn't care. I just needed land. I needed warmth. I needed help. By the time I reached the dock, the baby had gone quiet again, too quiet. I pressed 2 fingers to its neck, faint pulse, still there. I ran toward the cabin, soaked to the bone, my heart racing like I was 30 again. Inside, I laid the baby on the couch near the wood stove, threw 2 logs in and turned the flame up. I wrapped it tighter in a dry blanket, rubbing its arms, whispering nonsense just to keep the air alive. You're all right, you hear me? You're all right. The baby let out a small cough, a sound so small, yet it filled the room like thunder. When I heard the sirens in the distance, I nearly collapsed. Red and blue lights cut through the fog, painting the walls with color. Paramedics rushed in. I stepped back, my hands still shaking, watching them work, checking vitals, oxygen, warm blankets, precise movements like a dance they'd done 100 times before. One of them looked at me and said, "You saved this baby's life." But I didn't feel like a hero, I just felt numb. They loaded the baby onto a stretcher covered in clean linens. As they carried it out, I reached for the tiny hand sticking out from the blanket. It was warm now, alive. "Hang in there, kid," I said softly. "You're not going anywhere else tonight." The medic gave me a nod, then closed the doors. I stood there in the rain, watching the ambulance lights fade down the road, red bleeding into the mist. The quiet came back, but it wasn't peaceful anymore. It was heavier. I sat on the steps, staring at my hands. They were shaking, covered in mud and river water, but also life. I couldn't stop asking myself why. Why would she throw away something so small, so innocent? What kind of pain makes someone do that? The answers didn't come. Only the sound of the river rolling like nothing happened. I looked out toward the water, the same spot where I'd pulled the bag. You couldn't tell anything had happened there. No ripples, no trace, just calm, endless flow, but I knew better now. The river hides things until it doesn't, and once it decides to give something back, you don't get to look away. I stood up, walked back inside, and sat near the fire. The baby's blanket, that small, soaked piece of fabric, was still there, draped over the arm of the chair. I stared at it for a long time, the way a man stares at something he knows will change everything. When I finally picked it up, it smelled faintly of milk and rain. There was a tiny stitch on the corner, a letter M. Mark. No, that couldn't be. It didn't make sense. But my stomach twisted all the same. I took a deep breath, rubbed the edge of the fabric between my fingers, and whispered to the empty room. "What the hell did you do, Lena?" Outside, thunder rumbled low in the distance, and the rain started again, soft at first, then harder. The kind of rain that washes nothing away. I stayed there for hours, just listening to it, trying to make sense of the impossible. Somewhere out there, that woman, my daughter-in-law, was pretending none of this happened. But I'd seen it. And now, I couldn't unsee it. You think life stops teaching you lessons when you get old. But that night, I learned something new. Sometimes the river doesn't take, it delivers. And when it does, you better be ready to face what floats back. Because once the truth starts to rise, there's no pushing it back under. Stay with me, because what came next would turn every part of my quiet life upside down. Hospitals always smell the same, like bleach and quiet fear. The kind of place where even good news sounds tired. I sat in that waiting room for what felt like hours. My hands were still shaking, my clothes still damp from the river. Every time someone walked by in scrubs, I looked up, hoping they'd stop, hoping they'd tell me something, anything. Finally, a nurse approached. "Mr. Pierce." I stood up so fast my chair squeaked against the floor. "The baby's stable," she said. "Mild hypothermia, but he's breathing on his own now." I didn't realize I'd been holding my breath until it came out in one long, shaky exhale. "Thank God," I whispered. She gave me a small smile, the kind nurses use when they've seen too much. "You did a good thing today. You saved a life." I nodded, but it didn't feel like saving, not yet. It felt like I just opened a door I wasn't meant to open. Before I could ask more, two detectives walked in, a man and a woman. The woman led, mid-40s, sharp eyes, dark coat still dripping from the rain. "Mr. Pierce," she said, flipping open a notebook. "Detective Lowell, we'd like to ask you a few questions." I sat down again, heart pounding. She didn't waste time. "How exactly did you find the infant?" I told her everything: the car, the bag, the sound, the baby, the ambulance. Every word felt heavier coming out of my mouth. When I finished, she wrote for a while, then looked up. "You said it was your daughter-in-law's car." "Yes." "Lena Pierce." "Yes." "And your son, Mark Pierce. He passed away a year ago." "That's right." She paused, pen still. "I have to ask this, sir. Did you have any issues with your daughter-in-law before your son's death?" I frowned. "Issues? Any arguments, disagreements, property disputes?" I laughed short, bitter. "No, she took my son, but I thought she took care of his memory too." The male detective shifted in his seat. Meaning she was all I had left of him. I didn't mean it to sound angry, but it did, maybe because it was. Detective Lowell leaned forward. "Mr. Pierce, we're not accusing anyone, but we do need to establish motive. You said you saw her throw something into the river. Is it possible you misinterpreted what you saw? Are you asking if I imagined it?" She didn't answer right away. Just looked at me, calm, professional, the kind of look people give when they're waiting for you to doubt yourself. I leaned back, folded my hands. "I know what I saw." She nodded, closed her notebook, and stood. "We'll look into it. In the meantime, the hospital has the baby in neonatal care. If anything changes, they'll contact you." As they walked away, I caught a few words between them, something about timeline inconsistencies and no confirmation on the car. I felt the old weight in my chest again. That same ache that had settled there the night they told me Mark was gone. When I finally got to see the baby, he was lying in a small incubator, wrapped in white, a little beanie covering his head. He looked so fragile, like a breath could break him. The nurse said he was about 7 months along, premature. I stared at him, doing the math in my head. 7 months. Mark died 12 months ago. My throat went dry. That couldn't be right, unless I closed my eyes, tried to breathe. Logic fought emotion, but emotion always wins first. Could it be someone else's child? Could I have been wrong about Lena? No. I'd seen her face, that look. It wasn't confusion, it was fear. But what if that fear wasn't guilt? What if it was something else, something darker chasing her? The questions burned through my mind, one after another, faster than I could silence them. Why would she keep the pregnancy a secret? Why wouldn't she tell me? And why now, after all this time, would she try to make it disappear? I pressed my hand against the glass of the incubator. The baby moved slightly, one tiny hand twitching, and in that split second I saw Mark. The same curve of his mouth when he slept as a boy. A flashback hit me, a memory I hadn't touched in years. Mark was 15, sitting with me on the dock one summer evening. He was quiet that night, staring out at the water. He finally said, "Dad, if anything ever happens to me, promise you'll look out for her." I laughed, told him he was being dramatic. But he just smiled and said, "No, I'm serious. She's strong, but she needs someone who believes in her." And now here I was, holding on to the only thing left of both of them. The irony hit like a punch to the gut. He asked me to protect her, and I just saved a child she tried to destroy. I sat back down, the fluorescent light humming overhead. My reflection in the glass looked older than I remembered. Grayer, smaller, like the world had kept spinning and left me behind. I could feel the nurse watching me, but I didn't care. I whispered under my breath, "What did you do, Lena?" No answer, of course. Just the steady beeping of the monitors and the baby's tiny chest rising and falling, slow but steady. I stayed there until the night shift came in. The halls grew quieter, the lights dimmed. I still couldn't leave. Some part of me wanted to believe there was an explanation. That maybe it wasn't her. That maybe she panicked. That maybe it wasn't what it looked like. But the image of that car, that splash, it wouldn't let go. I walked outside to clear my head. The parking lot was slick from rain. The reflection of the streetlights shimmered across puddles, making the world look like it was underwater. I leaned against my truck, closed my eyes, and let the rain hit my face. When you lose someone you love, you spend months trying to convince yourself that pain won't find you again. But pain doesn't work that way. It finds new doors to come through. This one came with a heartbeat. As I sat there in the dark, I made myself a promise. I was going to find out the truth. Whether it cleared her name or damned it forever, I was done pretending not to see what was right in front of me. And if that baby really was Mark's, then saving him wasn't just an accident. It was a sign. Sometimes life puts the pieces back in your hands, one by one, even if they cut you open in the process. The only question left was how much more I was willing to bleed to find the truth. So I took one last look at that glowing hospital window, the room where the baby slept, and whispered, "Don't worry, kid, I'm not going anywhere." Then I climbed into my truck, started the engine, and drove into the rain, straight toward the questions that wouldn't stop burning. When I walked back into the hospital the next morning, the air felt different. Quieter, softer somehow, like the world had exhaled after holding its breath all night. I followed the sound of steady beeping down the hall until I reached the neonatal room. Through the glass, I saw him small, wrapped tight in white, his tiny chest rising and falling like a whisper. For a long time, I just stood there, not moving. You spend a lifetime building things, houses, furniture, bridges, and yet nothing you ever make feels as fragile as that little body in the incubator. A nurse came over, young, gentle voice. "You can go in for a few minutes, Mr. Pierce." I nodded, but my throat was dry. It took me a second to realize I'd been holding the doorknob without turning it. Inside, the room was warm. Machines hummed quietly. The baby's skin looked pinker than before, alive. His fingers curled slightly like he was trying to hold on to something invisible. I pulled the chair closer and sat down. "Hey, kid," I said, keeping my voice low. "You've caused quite a storm, you know that." He didn't move, of course, but one eyelid fluttered, and for a second, I caught a glimpse of those eyes. Brown, deep and steady, just like Mark's. It hit me like a freight train, same shape, same calm, same little flicker before falling asleep when he was a baby. I reached out, careful not to touch any of the wires. My hand hovered an inch above his blanket. "You've got his eyes, buddy, you really do." The nurse checked the monitor, smiled faintly, then said, "He's doing well, stronger than we expected for being born this early." "Born early?" I asked. She nodded. "About 7 months along, the doctors think. He's a fighter. 7 months, that number stuck in my head like a nail. 7 months old, and Mark's accident had been almost exactly 7 months ago. My mind went quiet. All the noise, the grief, the questions, they folded into one sharp, clear thought. This wasn't some stranger's child. This was his. Everything made sense now. The timeline, the secrecy, the fear. Lena must have found out she was pregnant after the crash. Maybe she couldn't handle it. Maybe she couldn't bear the reminder. But standing there looking at that baby, all I could think was, how could anyone throw this away? I leaned closer, whispering like it was a prayer. You shouldn't be here, not like this, but I'm glad you are. He made a small sound, not quite a cry, more like a sigh, and for the first time in months, something inside me softened. The nurse handed me a clipboard. We don't have a name on file yet. Would you like to fill this in temporarily? I looked down at the blank space. Name. My hands shook holding the pen. For a second I thought about writing Mark Jr., but that didn't feel right. He wasn't just Mark's echo, he was his own story. I looked up at the ceiling, then back at the tiny boy. Noah, I said finally. His name's Noah. The nurse smiled. That's a beautiful name. Means rest, I said softly. But maybe it also means new beginnings. When she left, I stayed there, just me, Noah, and the quiet hum of second chances. I thought about the last time I saw Mark alive. He was leaving for work, laughing because I was nagging him about changing the oil in his truck. Dad, he said, you worry too much. Someone's gotta, I told him. He winked. Then keep doing it, you're good at it. And now here I was, still worrying, still trying to fix something broken, only this time. It wasn't an engine or a door hinge. It was life itself. I felt tears coming before I even realized it, not the loud kind, just quiet ones that find their own way down your face. He's all I have left, I whispered to no one in particular. Then I looked at Noah again and added, and somehow he's my second chance. The words surprised me. They felt truer than anything I'd said in years. Maybe grief doesn't disappear. Maybe it just waits for something small and pure to remind you that love doesn't end, it changes shape. I sat there another hour, just watching him breathe. Every rise and fall of his chest felt like a heartbeat I thought I'd lost. When the nurse came back, she handed me a form and said, "They're going to run some genetic testing, just routine." I nodded, pretending it was all just procedure, but deep down I already knew what it would say. I stood up, reluctant to leave. Can I come back tomorrow?" "Of course," she said. "He responds well to your voice, it calms him." That made me smile, a real one, the kind I hadn't felt in a long time. As I walked out into the hallway, I passed the window one last time. Noah's tiny hand had slipped out of the blanket, reaching into the air. It looked like he was waving. "See you soon, kid," I whispered. Outside, the day was bright, the kind of morning that feels unfairly beautiful when your heart's still heavy. Birds sang. The river nearby shimmered under the sun. I stopped by the railing, looking out toward the water that had almost taken him, and that had already taken so much from me. For the first time, I didn't feel anger toward it, only gratitude. Because sometimes the same place that breaks you gives you back the peace you didn't know you needed. I breathed deep, the air crisp and clean, and whispered into the breeze, "Thank you." Maybe I wasn't thanking the river. Maybe I was thanking Mark. Maybe both. Either way, it felt right. On the drive home, I kept thinking about that baby's name. Noah, one who survived the flood. Maybe this was my flood too, my storm. And maybe, just maybe, this little boy was the reason I'd kept building all along. Because you can rebuild houses. You can rebuild bridges, but rebuilding a life, that takes something bigger. That takes a reason. And for the first time in years, I had one. A few days later, I got a call from Detective Lowell. Her voice was firm, calm, the kind that doesn't waste time on small talk. "Mr. Pierce," she said, "we need you to come down to the station. There's been a development in your son's case." For a moment, I just sat there, staring at the receiver like it had grown teeth. A development, after a year of silence. Those words never mean anything good. At the station, the same rain that fell the night I found the baby was now tapping the windows again, steady, cold, familiar. Detective Lowell sat behind her desk, papers spread out, a cup of coffee gone cold beside her. She gestured for me to sit. "I reopened your son's file," she said. "Some of the details didn't add up." I nodded, though my chest was already tightening. "What do you mean?" She slid a few photos across the table. The first one hit me like a hammer, Mark's truck, crushed and twisted at the bottom of that ravine. I'd seen it before, but seeing it now, under fluorescent light and police notes scribbled across the edges, made it feel fresh again. "We had the forensics re-examined," she continued. The brake line wasn't worn out, Mr. Pierce. It was cut. I blinked. Cut. She nodded slowly. Clean, precise, not accidental. Someone tampered with the car. I leaned back, my hand gripping the armrest so tight it creaked. My voice came out barely a whisper. You're saying my son was murdered. That's what it looks like. I couldn't breathe for a moment. Murdered. The word hung in the air like smoke. My first thought wasn't anger, it was disbelief. Mark, the kid who'd built birdhouses with me in the garage, who never went to bed without checking on his mom when she was sick, murdered. Detective Lowell cleared her throat, bringing me back. We also found a large insurance transfer, she said. $120,000 was deposited into your daughter-in-law's account 3 days before the crash. I stared at her. Lena. Yes, I shook my head. No, she couldn't do that. She didn't respond, just watched me, the kind of silence detectives used to see if the truth leaks out on its own. She loved him, I said, the words sounding hollow even to me. They had problems, sure, but she wouldn't kill him. Detective Lowell slid another file toward me. Maybe she didn't mean to, or maybe she did. People do strange things when money, loss, or fear mix together. I stared at the photos again, my throat dry. There was one of Lena from the funeral, eyes red, face pale, holding the folded flag the department gave her because Mark was a contractor who'd done government work. She'd looked broken that day. She cried harder than anyone, I murmured. I remember thinking she looked like she'd lost everything. The detective nodded. Sometimes guilt looks like grief. That sentence sliced through me, because a part of me wanted to believe her, and another part wanted to throw her out of the room for even saying it. She wouldn't kill him, I repeated, softer this time, as if saying it enough could make it true. Detective Lowell leaned forward, her voice lower now. We also have the DNA results from the baby. My stomach dropped. She opened a manila envelope and pulled out a single page. It's conclusive, she said. The child is biologically your grandson, Mark and Lena's. I felt dizzy. For a moment, everything around me blurred. My grandson, Mark's blood. That little boy I'd pulled from the river, he wasn't just a life I saved. He was my own family, my own blood come back to me through the water. But the next thought came fast and cruel. If Lena knew the baby was Mark's, why throw him away? Why would she do that? I asked, barely recognizing my own voice. Detective Lowell hesitated. We can't know yet, but if she was involved in your son's death, the child might have been seen as evidence, or maybe she panicked. Maybe she saw him as the past catching up to her. I sank back in the chair, my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my teeth. My mind was a mess of memories, Lena crying at the funeral, hugging me so tight I could barely breathe. Her voice shaking when she said, "He left me nothing but debts." At the time, I thought she meant bills. Now I wasn't so sure. She told me he left her nothing but debts. I said out loud, almost to myself. But maybe what she meant was guilt. Detective Lowell looked at me with something between sympathy and curiosity. You said she hasn't contacted you since the funeral. Not once. Then I'd be careful, Mr. Pierce. If she's capable of this, she might not be done. Her words hung in the air long after I left the station. Driving home through the rain, my thoughts spun like the wipers on my windshield, fast, frantic, useless. Every memory I had of Lena replayed itself with a new tint of suspicion. The nervous tapping of her fingers during the wake, the way she refused to open the mailbox for weeks after the accident. The day she told me to stop coming by, that I reminded her too much of Mark. Was that grief or fear? I parked in front of my house but didn't get out. I just sat there, staring at the reflection of the porch light on the windshield. She wouldn't kill him, I whispered again. But this time it sounded more like a question. The rain softened to a drizzle, tapping gently against the roof. I could almost hear Mark's voice again, that same voice from all those summers we spent building things together. He used to say, "Dad, everything breaks for a reason. You just have to find where the crack started." I closed my eyes. Maybe this was the crack. Maybe this was where everything broke, not at the crash, but somewhere before. And now I had to find it. Inside the house, I lit a fire, trying to chase off the chill that seemed to cling to me since that morning on the river. On the mantel sat a photo, Mark, grinning, holding a hammer. Lena beside him, smiling too, her hand resting over her stomach. I hadn't noticed it before, but she looked almost nervous. A hand over her stomach, pregnant. I stared at that photo until my eyes burned. So she knew. She knew she was carrying his child. And she still... No, I couldn't think that, not yet. I turned away from the photo, pacing the room. My heart felt torn in two directions between the man who raised me to forgive and the father who couldn't understand how anyone could do this to his son. Conflict of loyalty, that's what they'd call it in one of those detective shows Mark used to watch. But this wasn't television. This was real. I looked out the window, the river just visible beyond the trees. It was calm again, like nothing had happened. But I knew better. The river didn't forget, it just waited. And maybe that's what I had to do too. Wait, watch, and be ready. Because somewhere out there, Lena was still walking around and she knew something I didn't. And whatever that was, it had already killed once. I whispered to the empty room, "You wanted me to protect her, son, but I think it's time I protect what's left of you." The fire cracked, and for a second the sound almost answered back. The paper shook in my hands, though not because of the cold. It was the words on it, cold, final, printed in perfect black ink. Denied. That's all it said, but it may as well have been a sentence carved in stone. The judge's voice still echoed in my head. "Mr. Pierce, you're 68 years old, you have a history of heart complications, and you live alone. The court does not deem you fit to raise an infant." For a long while, I just sat there in the hallway, the sound of my heartbeat louder than the murmurs of people walking past. I thought about all the times I'd built something out of nothing, a table from scraps, a bridge from driftwood, a home from grief. And now they were telling me I couldn't build a life for the one person who gave mine a reason again. When I got home, the house felt emptier than ever. No laughter, no tiny cry, just the creak of the floorboards and the steady hum of silence. On the table lay the photo of my son, Mark, smiling, sawdust in his hair, pride in his eyes. I picked it up and whispered, "They think I'm too old to take care of him, but I took care of you, didn't I?" That night I didn't sleep much. Instead, I made a list. Not of what I'd lost, I already knew that by heart, but of what I could still do. The next morning, I signed up for a child care training program at the community center. The lady at the desk looked at me twice. "You sure, sir? Most folks your age take gardening." I smiled. Well, maybe I'm just planting something different. Week after week, I showed up. I learned how to swaddle a baby, how to feed, how to calm a cry. The younger parents watched me like I was out of place. Maybe I was, but I kept at it. Because when you've lost as much as I have, you stop caring about how you look doing the right thing. At home, I set up a small corner for Noah. I found old wood in the shed, the same kind I used when Mark was born. I sanded each piece by hand, carving it slow, careful, like a prayer in motion. The smell of cedar filled the air, and for the first time in months I felt alive again. Every nail I drove into that wood felt like a promise to build something lasting, not just for me but for the little boy who didn't ask for any of this. I bought a stroller from a neighbor who was moving away. It was old, the wheels a little rusty, but I fixed them up. I took it out every morning, pushing it down the trail by the river, even when it was empty. People stared. Some smiled, some didn't. They probably thought I'd lost my mind, but I wasn't pushing a stroller. I was pushing hope. When the community nurse came by to check on me, she noticed the crib, the training certificates, the CPR kit by the wall. "You really went all in, didn't you?" she said. I nodded. "If they say I'm too old to start over, I'll prove them wrong the only way I know, by doing." The days got longer, warmer. I started waking up early again before sunrise, the way I used to when Mark was a kid. I'd make coffee, open the window, and let the sound of the river drift in. It reminded me that time keeps moving, whether we're ready or not, and so did I. I joined a local fitness group, mostly folks half my age. I couldn't keep up at first, but I laughed more than I had in years. One of them said, "You're not like other grandpas." I said, "Guess I never learned how to quit." Every step I took, every lesson I learned, every drop of sweat, it was all for Noah. Because I wanted the world to know that love doesn't check your birth certificate before it decides if you're worthy. Months passed. When I looked in the mirror, I didn't see an old man anymore. I saw a builder, not of wood, but of faith. The day I went back to court, I wore the same flannel shirt I'd worn when I saved Noah from the river. It still smelled faintly of rain and sawdust, two things that had always felt like home. The judge looked at me over her glasses. "You again, Mr. Pierce." "Yes, ma'am," I said, "me again." She flipped through the papers, my certificates, my medical report, the statement from the nurse. For a moment the room was silent. Then she said something that felt like the sun breaking through clouds. "I see no reason to deny your request a second time." I didn't cheer, I didn't even smile right away. I just breathed, slow, deep, grateful. Outside the courthouse, I sat on the steps, feeling the wind on my face. For the first time in a long time, it didn't feel cold. I thought about what people had said. "You're too old to start over." Maybe they were right, maybe I wasn't starting over, because truth is I never stopped. Every morning I built something, a table, a bridge, a crib, a life. That's what builders do, and some of us keep building even when our hands shake. As the sun dipped low, I looked up at the courthouse windows, glowing in the orange light, and whispered to myself. They said I was too old to start over, but what they didn't know is I never stopped building. It was close to midnight when the phone rang, the kind of call that makes your blood run cold before you even pick it up. I almost didn't answer, but something inside told me I had to. When I pressed the receiver to my ear, I heard it, that voice. Calm, sharp, familiar. "You have something that belongs to me, Lena." I froze. For a moment I couldn't even speak. The sound of her breathing on the other end felt like a ghost walking through my house. "What do you want, Lena?" I finally managed. A soft laugh, dry, humorless. "You know what I want, Harold. Don't act stupid." I swallowed hard. "If you mean the baby, he's safe. Leave him alone." "The baby," she repeated, dragging out the word like it was poison on her tongue. "You mean my son, the one you stole from me?" I clenched my jaw. "I didn't steal him. You threw him away." Silence. For a long second I thought she'd hung up. Then her voice dropped lower, colder. "You think you can play the hero. You've always hated me. You never thought I was good enough for him." I didn't deny it. There wasn't a point. "Meet me," she said, "tomorrow night, the warehouse by the river. You remember it?" I did. It was where Mark used to store his lumber, where he built his last project before the accident. "What for?" I asked. "I want what's mine, the insurance money, the kid, all of it." My grip tightened on the phone. "You're out of your mind." She let out a quiet laugh. "Then maybe you shouldn't come alone." The line went dead. I stood there for a long time, listening to the dial tone, feeling every muscle in my body go rigid. The river, the warehouse, the same place where everything started, now where it might end. I sat down at the table, the weight of it all pressing into my chest. She was alive, angry, and desperate, and that made her dangerous. For a moment I thought about calling it off, letting the police handle it, staying out of it completely. But then I looked over at the crib in the corner of the living room. Noah, peaceful, safe, completely unaware that the world could be this cruel. I made up my mind right there. I wasn't going to let her hurt him, not again. The next day I went to see Detective Lowell. I told her everything, the call, the threat, the meeting place. She frowned. "You can't go alone, Mr. Pierce. Let us handle it." "I'll go," I said quietly, "but I'll keep her talking long enough for you to move in." She hesitated. "You're putting yourself at risk." I smiled faintly. That's what fathers do. That night, I pulled out one of Mark's old tape recorders, the kind we used to use for music lessons. I wired it to a small microphone, taped it under my jacket. My hands trembled the whole time. It's funny, I've never been a brave man, not really. I was always the builder, the fixer, the quiet one. But fear changes shape when it's for someone else. When I looked in the mirror before leaving, I barely recognized the man staring back. Gray hair, tired eyes, but there was something else there too, steel. I drove to the warehouse just past midnight. The moon hung low, throwing long shadows across the riverbank. The building looked like it hadn't been touched in years, rusted siding, broken windows, the smell of oil and damp wood. I parked a few yards away and called Lowell. "I'm here," I said softly. "Stay in your car. We're en route," she replied, but I knew better than to wait. Lena wouldn't. When I stepped inside, the air was thick with dust and silence. Then footsteps, soft, deliberate. She appeared from the shadows, wearing black, her hair tied back, eyes gleaming like glass in the moonlight. "You came," she said. "Of course I did. Where's the baby?" "Safe, somewhere you'll never find him." She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "You think you can keep me from him, from what's mine?" I took a slow step closer. "You tried to kill him, Lena. You don't get to call him yours." Her jaw tightened. "You don't understand anything. That baby ruined everything." I stared at her, stunned. "He's your son. He's Mark's mistake," she snapped. "You think I didn't know about the money, the debts? He left me with nothing but shame and bills I couldn't pay. So yes, I took the insurance. It was supposed to make things right. But then that baby came, proof of everything I lost." Her voice cracked just once before hardening again. "I had to end it." I felt my stomach turn. "You killed him," I whispered. Her eyes flicked to mine, no denial, no remorse, just emptiness. "I made sure the brakes would fail," she said quietly. "It was quick. He didn't suffer." The words hit me like fire. I took a step back, my knees shaking. "You murdered my son." She reached into her coat and pulled out a gun, small, black, trembling slightly in her hand. "Don't make me do something stupid, Harold," she said. "I just want the money, then you can keep playing grandpa." I raised my hand slowly. "You don't want this path, Lena. There's no coming back from it." "Coming back?" She laughed bitterly. "I crossed that line a long time ago." Outside, faint sirens began to echo, still distant but closing in. I had to keep her talking. "You could have started over," I said softly. "You could have asked for help." "From you?" she snapped. "The man who judged me every time I walked into that house." I didn't argue. She was right. I had judged her, maybe too much, but that didn't make any of this right. "I was wrong," I said, my voice trembling. "I should have seen how broken things were. But this isn't how you fix it." For a split second, something flickered in her expression, guilt, maybe grief. Then it was gone. "Goodbye, Harold." She lifted the gun. The sound of my own heartbeat drowned everything else out. Then a shout from outside. "Police! Drop the weapon!" Lena spun toward the door just as the lights from the cruisers flooded through the cracks in the wall. I ducked behind a beam, the gunshot ringing out a heartbeat later. Pain burned through my shoulder, sharp and hot. I hit the ground, gasping, clutching the wound. When I looked up, Detective Lowell and her team had stormed in. Lena was on the floor, pinned, the gun sliding away across the concrete. She screamed, kicked, cursed, but it was over. As they pulled her up, she looked at me, eyes wild. "You think this makes you a hero? You're just an old fool trying to play savior." Maybe she was right, but I didn't care. I just closed my eyes, whispering to myself through the pain, "It's over, Mark. It's finally over." Outside, the cold night air hit me like a wave. Paramedics were already waiting. As they patched me up, I could hear the faint cry of a baby somewhere in the distance, not real, just memory. But it reminded me why I'd done it. They said I was too old to start over. But what they didn't know is I never stopped building. And that night, I didn't just save a life. I reclaimed what was left of mine. Rain has a way of erasing things, footsteps, blood, even memories if you let it. But that night, it couldn't wash away what was coming. The storm had been building all evening, low thunder rolling over the hills like a warning. By the time I reached the warehouse by the river, the rain was coming down sideways, sharp as needles against my face. The old place looked smaller than I remembered, half-rotten siding, yellow light flickering from inside, like the building itself was breathing in pain. I took a deep breath, pushed the door open. The hinges screamed. Inside, it smelled of rust and oil and wet wood. The air was thick, like the whole room was holding its breath. And then I saw her, Lena, standing under that weak bulb, her hair plastered to her face, a gun in her hand. Her eyes, they weren't wild anymore. They were empty. "You're late," she said, her voice echoing through the space. "I almost didn't come," I said quietly. She smiled, just barely. "But you did, you always do." I took a slow step forward. "Where's the money, Lena? What's this really about?" She tilted her head. "Money? You think this is about money?" Her laugh came out sharp, broken. "No, Harold, this is about cleaning up the mess your perfect son left behind." The words hit like a slap, but I didn't move. I just watched her, the way her hands trembled, the way she kept glancing toward the shadows behind me. You killed him, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Her face twitched, but she didn't deny it. Instead, she lowered the gun a little and began to talk, not like a confession, but like she'd been waiting to unload a weight that had been eating her alive. I cut the brakes, she said flatly. He was supposed to crash. It was supposed to look like an accident. We were drowning in debt, Harold. You have no idea what that feels like. I did it for the insurance to survive. I stood frozen. My throat went dry, my pulse loud in my ears. Mark trusted you, I said quietly. He loved you. Her voice broke. I loved him too, but after he died, everything fell apart. The house, the bills, the looks people gave me, so I left. I thought it was over. She ran a shaking hand through her wet hair. Then I found out I was pregnant. The rain outside hammered the tin roof harder. Each drop sounded like a heartbeat counting down. I hid it, she continued. Didn't tell a soul. I couldn't let anyone know. They'd ask questions. They'd take everything. Her voice cracked again. When Noah was born, I couldn't look at him. He had Mark's eyes. Every time he cried, it was like hearing him all over again. I panicked. I wanted it to stop. I felt something in my chest tear open. So you threw him in the river. She looked up, eyes red. You don't understand. It was mercy. I thought I was freeing him, freeing myself. I didn't think he'd survive. I took a step closer. My voice shook. You tried to bury your sin in the same river that took my peace. Her lips trembled. For the first time, her shoulders dropped, the fight fading from her eyes. Maybe I deserve whatever comes next, she said. Outside, the sirens were getting closer, faint but unmistakable. Then let it come, I said softly. Stop running. Her gaze darted toward the door, panic flashing for a second. They'll take me away. You don't know what they'll do. Maybe they'll do what you never could, I said. Tell the truth. Her face hardened again. You think you're better than me? You think saving that baby makes you holy? I shook my head. No, Lena, it just makes me human. The sirens grew louder, blue and red lights flashing faintly through the cracks in the old walls. She raised the gun again, her hands trembling worse now. I can't go to prison, Harold. I won't. Then don't, I said quietly. End it another way. Tell them what happened. Let Noah grow up knowing his father wasn't a fool who trusted the wrong person. Let him know the truth. For a moment, I thought I saw something change in her, a flicker of regret, of exhaustion. Then the light shifted, the siren flash caught her face and something snapped. She screamed, a sound torn between anger and grief, and pulled the trigger. I moved without thinking. The gunshot exploded in the air, the sound deafening, hot pain ripping through my shoulder. I hit the floor, the smell of gunpowder mixing with rain and rust. Through the ringing in my ears, I heard the door slam open, shouting, boots pounding. Police, drop it. Another shot. Then silence. When I opened my eyes, Detective Lowell was kneeling over me, her hands pressing on the wound. Stay with me, Mr. Pierce, she said. You're gonna be okay. I turned my head just enough to see Lena on the ground, handcuffed, her face pale under the flashing lights. She wasn't dead. For some reason, that felt like justice. Not revenge, justice. As they lifted me onto the stretcher, she looked at me one last time. No words, no tears, just that hollow look of someone who finally ran out of lies. I closed my eyes, the rain hitting my face again as they carried me outside. The storm was easing now, the worst of it passing, leaving behind that clean, heavy silence only rain can make. Somewhere out there, the river kept flowing, steady, endless, the same river that had taken my son and almost taken his child. But not this time. Not anymore. I felt the world blur at the edges, the pain fading beneath the hum of sirens. And before everything went dark, I whispered, "It's over." For the first time in a long time, I believed it. They said recovery would take months, maybe longer. But every morning I woke up with one reason to get better: Noah. The bullet had missed anything vital, the doctors said. You're lucky, one of them told me. Lucky. I'd never really believed in luck. But lying in that hospital bed, listening to the quiet hum of machines, I started to think maybe grace has a way of disguising itself as chance. The day I was discharged, the sky was clear, the kind of clear that only comes after a storm has torn through. Detective Lowell was waiting at the front doors, holding a file. "Congratulations," she said, smiling. "You're officially his guardian. The judge signed the papers this morning. For a second, I couldn't speak. I just stared at her, the weight of those words sinking in. Guardian, I whispered. That sounds big. She grinned. It is, you earned it. When I stepped outside, the world smelled new, wet pavement, sunlight on wood, the faint sweetness of spring. I looked up, whispered a quiet thank you to whoever was still listening. At home, Noah's crib sat by the window, sunlight spilling across his blanket. He was sleeping soft, steady breaths, one hand tucked under his chin. I sat beside him and just watched. You made it, kid, I murmured. We both did. A few days later, someone left a newspaper on my porch. Front page, bold letters. 68-year-old father saves his grandson from the river of death. I laughed when I saw it, half pride, half disbelief. Inside, there was a photo of me holding Noah, his tiny hand gripping my finger. The caption read, Builder of Hope. Builder of Hope. I'd built homes, bridges, furniture, but never thought I'd build a legacy out of love and second chances. Word spread fast. The neighbors brought casseroles. The pastor stopped by with flowers. Even the kids from down the street came to see the baby from the river. One Sunday, the church held a small gathering. Not a ceremony, just folks wanting to say something kind. Pastor Miller said, Sometimes God doesn't send miracles from heaven. Sometimes he builds them through hands that already know how to create. When I looked around, I saw faces smiling, nodding not out of pity but pride. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like a man holding on to grief. I felt like a man still shaping something good out of what was left. Noah started to grow fast. He'd laugh every time the sunlight hit the wind chimes on the porch, that same high, pure laugh Mark had when he was a baby. Every sound, every small thing he did, it felt like a message, a reminder that love doesn't end, it just changes form. Sometimes at night, when I'd rock him to sleep, I'd whisper the same thing I used to tell Mark when he was little. You're safe, son, I've got you. And every time I said it, I meant it twice. Once for Noah, once for Mark. Life didn't magically get easier. Bills still came, my back still ached, and the nights still felt long. But there was purpose now. A reason to get up, to cook breakfast, to build tiny things, a wooden mobile, a toy train, a new crib out of reclaimed cedar from my old workshop. Reporters came by once, wanted to do an interview for a local magazine. They asked, "What made you risk your life that night?" I thought for a second and said, "It wasn't risk, it was instinct. You don't measure danger when someone you love is in it." They printed that quote under another photo, me in the workshop, Noah sitting on the table, gnawing on a piece of wood like it was the best toy in the world. After that, people started calling me the Builder of Hope. At first, it felt silly, too big a title for an old man in a flannel shirt. But one afternoon, I caught sight of Noah stacking little blocks, trying to fit one piece on top of another, his face serious like mine used to be. And I realized maybe hope really is something you can build piece by piece, moment by moment. The community never stopped checking in. Mrs. Alvarez from next door dropped by every Friday with soup. The pastor visited on Sundays to read Noah Bible stories. And the kids from the high school offered to paint the porch when they heard about what happened. One of them said, "You give people hope, Mr. Pierce." I smiled and shook my head. Nah, I just held on when it got dark. But deep down, I knew it was more than that. Holding on, that's the start. But rebuilding after everything falls apart, that's where the real work begins. Some nights, when the house was quiet and the only sound was Noah breathing in his sleep, I'd sit by the window and look at the river. It didn't scare me anymore. The same water that had once taken so much from me now reflected the moon like glass, still, calm, alive. I thought about Lena sometimes. She was in prison now, serving her sentence. The papers said she'd finally confessed to everything, the breaks, the insurance, the baby. They called her story a tragedy. Maybe it was. But for me, it was something else, a reminder that even from the worst kind of pain, something pure can be born. Every time I looked at Noah, I saw it redemption in the shape of a child's heartbeat. One evening, as the sun went down, I took him out to the porch. The sky was painted gold and red, the river shining like it had been forgiven too. He reached out toward the light, his little fingers curling at the air, and I laughed softly. "You like that, huh?" I said. That's what hope looks like." He giggled that same laugh again, the one that sounded like new beginnings. And as I held him close, I whispered, "They said I was too old to start over, but what they didn't know is that I never stopped building. Because sometimes starting over doesn't mean beginning again. It means finishing what love left undone." The river looked calm again. Not the kind of calm that hides secrets, but the kind that finally knows peace. It had been 5 years since that night, the rain, the sirens, the pain. 5 years since everything broke apart and somehow came back together. The workshop smelled the same: cedar shavings, varnish, old memories soaked into the walls. The morning sun pushed through the window, catching the dust in midair, turning it gold. Noah's laughter echoed through the room. The sound bounced off the old tools, the workbench, the shelves stacked with wood. He was 5 now, curious, stubborn, and bright as the sunrise. "Grandpa," he called, running between the sawhorses, a toy plane in his hand. "Did you really pull me out of the river?" I stopped sanding the leg of a chair and looked at him. His cheeks were flushed, eyes full of life, Mark's eyes. That same spark, that same warmth. I smiled. "No, son, you pulled me out first." He tilted his head like he was trying to solve a riddle. "But you're the one who did the saving." I chuckled. "Maybe, but you're the reason I remembered how." He grinned, clearly unsure what that meant, then ran off again, making airplane noises, spinning circles in the sunlight. I watched him, my chest full in that quiet, heavy way love feels when it's too big for words. The walls of the workshop carried so many ghosts, not the kind that haunt you, but the kind that remind you how far you've come. Mark's old toolbox sat in the corner, still scratched with initials. M.P. On the back wall hung the first hammer we bought together, handle cracked, head rusted, but sacred all the same. And on the workbench, half finished, sat a new project, a small wooden boat. Not a fancy one, just something Noah and I could float down the shallows when spring came. He'd begged me to teach him how to build something that could go anywhere. And when I asked why, he said, "Because Dad liked the river, and you do too." The innocence in that answer nearly broke me. To him, the river wasn't tragedy, it was freedom. I wiped the sawdust from my hands and ran my fingers across the tabletop, smooth, solid, familiar. Right there, carved into the wood, were the words, marked 1990. He'd done that the summer we finished this table together. He was 16, proud of his work, grinning from ear to ear. I'd yelled at him for carving into good wood. But he just laughed and said, "One day it'll make it worth more." He wasn't wrong. I traced the letters with my thumb, each groove a memory. The sound of the river outside came through the open window, soft and steady. That river took a lot from me, but it also gave something back, something better. It taught me that loss isn't the end. It's the space love grows into when it has nowhere else to go. Noah came running back with a wooden plane missing one wing. "It broke," he said, holding it out like a wounded bird. I took it, examined the small crack. "That's all right," I told him. "Things break all the time, the trick is knowing how to fix them." He watched carefully as I glued the piece, pressed it together, then handed it back. "See, good as new." He held it up, eyes wide, like it was magic. "You're really good at fixing things, Grandpa." I smiled, my throat tightening a little. "Well, I've had a lot of practice." He ran off again, and I leaned back in my chair, watching him circle the workshop like a bird testing its wings. The world outside was bright and alive. Neighbors waved from across the fence, their laughter carrying on the wind. The town knew our story now. The paper had called me the builder of hope, but I never liked the title. I wasn't a hero. I was just a man who refused to stop building, even when everything fell apart. There's something about wood that teaches you about forgiveness. You sand it, and the rough edges soften. You join broken pieces, and they hold stronger than before. Maybe people are the same. Every mark on my hands told a story, some painful, some beautiful, all worth keeping. The church bells rang in the distance, soft and slow. I remembered that Sunday after the court ruling, the pastor saying, "God doesn't waste pain, Harold, he rebuilds with it." At the time, I didn't understand. Now, watching Noah chase sunlight through sawdust, I did. He was the rebuild, the second chance. The proof that even after everything, life still finds a way to create something worth holding onto. Noah stopped near the window, staring at the river in the distance. "Grandpa," he said quietly, "do you still miss him?" I turned toward the light, following his gaze. Every day I wanted to say, but instead I said, "Missing someone isn't bad, kiddo, it means they mattered." He nodded like he understood, even if just a little. Then, with that curious spark again, he asked, "Do you think Dad can see us?" I smiled softly. "I think he's closer than you think." The boy smiled back, then pressed his hand against the window pane, leaving a small print. "Then I'll wave extra big." I didn't tell him, but I did the same thing after he left the room, just pressed my palm against the glass for a moment and whispered, "We're okay, son, we made it." The light outside shifted, spilling gold over the workbench. The carved name, marked 1990, caught the sun, glowing like something alive. I ran my hand across the table one last time, felt the warmth of the wood, the smoothness of every repaired crack. Maybe that's what healing really is, not erasing the damage, but learning to live inside it. I looked around the workshop. The shelves full of tiny projects, the rocking chair by the door, the little footprints on the floor where Noah had tracked in mud after playing in the yard. This was our legacy, not the house, not the tools, but the love that filled it all. As the day faded, Noah curled up in my lap, half asleep, the wooden plane still in his hand. I held him close, my chin resting on his hair, the smell of sawdust and soap between us. "Grandpa," he mumbled, "when I grow up, can I build things like you?" I smiled, closing my eyes. "You already are, kiddo. Every time you love someone, you're building something." He didn't answer. He was asleep before I finished. Outside, the river kept moving, quiet, endless, carrying reflections of the fading sky. I watched it through the window, feeling the rhythm match my heartbeat. Sometimes, the hands that build can also save not just homes, but hearts, because love doesn't stop when the hammer sets down or when the wood is done. It keeps shaping, keeps restoring, keeps finding its way into everything we touch. And as long as I'm still breathing, I'll keep building, not out of grief, but out of gratitude. If you believe love can rebuild what loss destroys, then maybe, just maybe, you already know what hope feels like.